Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We're driving my 2016 Pro-Tuned Subaru WRX right now, and I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about why parts for cars, specifically aftermarket parts, are always out of stock, COVID or not. Why does it seem like there's such supply chain demand issues? And I'm here to give you guys a little bit of knowledge and an explanation why you're always facing parts and batches of parts being out of stock, and why even after COVID, this is going to continue to be an issue, and why it's not really a problem because it's by design and it's not really going away. So first and foremost, why should you listen to me? One, I'm an enthusiast. I modify my car. I modify cars. That's what I love to do. The streets that I'm driving on are terrible right now. It's absolute madness, but I'm a big car enthusiast. I love modifying cars. On top of that, I've worked as a manufacturing engineer, manufacturing parts for both automotive sectors and aerospace. I'm currently working in the consulting field of mechanical engineering. I have worked for a performance company that works as a retail vendor for manufacturers, and I own my own car part manufacturing business. I manufacture car parts and sell them on the retail market. So that's the 30-second elevator pitch of who I am and why I am qualified to tell you guys exactly what I'm about to tell you guys and give you guys some information. So hopefully that spurs you to listen to what I have to say. We'll get a little bit of an acceleration here. And we've already gotten to the car in front of us. Well, that's a bummer. It's hard to use this car. It's at a level of fun that it's like not, there's rarely space to use it. So the question is, why are car parts, specifically aftermarket parts for any platform or for the WRX, it doesn't really matter, always out of stock? Why is there always lead time? Why are you always waiting for parts? And why has COVID basically made this problem worse, but basically just brought eyes to it? Now, there's a couple reasons. And I'll talk about all of them. Yes, some of it has to do with like global supply chain, shipping, but the majority of it is just the business behind parts. Everybody has this corporate vision of what a part manufacturer is. We're all used to Amazon and Walmart, but specifically Amazon. We have this idea that there is this massive, massive corporation with lots of money, lots of big suited people working at it that can ensure 2-day shipping, single-day shipping, and that has affected the world of e-commerce and part distribution, manufacturing, product manufacturing, all of that, because now there's this expectation and nobody can kind of compete and fight with Amazon. So the first and foremost and the most important thing to understand, and the biggest reason, is understanding the market that a manufacturer is delivering parts to. It all comes down to how many potential customers and buyers are there of that specific part. Now, let's just look at WRXs. That's because I drive them, and that's where my business kind of surrounds. There are 30,000 new WRXs that could potentially have parts sold to every year. So, of course, there's going to be a little turnover and people remove and put new parts on, but that's actually pretty rare when you look at existing customer bases. You really have this finite amount of people, specifically 30,000 people, new customers every year that could want your products if you're putting out WRX related products. In a perfect world, you'd sell a WRX part to every person within that group, but of course you're not going to have that market share. One, because not everyone wants your part, and two, there's competition. What ends up happening is you have a small recurring market, and you're trying to sell to as many people within that market, but you're trying to minimize and control your risk. What does that really mean? Well, if 30,000 people are potentially modifying their cars, I want to buy enough parts to be stocked and sell to those potential customers, but I want to make sure I don't purchase too many parts, because too many parts means I could potentially have more parts than I can even sell to that community, which means I lose money on those parts. You can see the problem. If you've got 10 people that want apples and you buy 10 apples, but 6 of them end up buying the apples and the other 4 don't want apples, now you have 4 apples that you've paid for and you don't want anymore. So what does that really mean? Well, that can be applied to every car and every part on the aftermarket community. Basically what I'm saying is the market is too small for these manufacturers to keep massive stores of their product. They need to order smaller batches so they're not sitting with all their money tied up on one product. It's basic business, but it's something that a lot of people don't think about. They always expect, oh, you should just have more, you should just have more. Well, financially, they can't and stay competitive. Car parts are also huge. You have to store all those parts, and there's a large magnitude of potential negatives to having too many parts. So that's the first and foremost reason to why parts aren't always in stock and why there's not a ton of them. And it's really because the markets are so small for each part. It's not even that you're missing the bulk, it just makes sense for companies not to overstock their products. And they won't, because it makes financial sense for them to keep lower stocks that they believe fit their market consumption. But of course, there are changes in market consumption, and all of a sudden a part's out of stock and they need to wait. So that's the economic reason behind what's happening. And then again, this is not considering COVID, it gets kind of exponentially built on when a lot of your manufacturing is done overseas. Of course, very few parts and companies can manufacture in the United States or not in Asia, either China or Southeast Asia. And before you say, that's a problem, I bet you're not willing to pay for it. What ends up happening is when you have a lot of your manufacturing done overseas, you then get into the how soon do I restock, what is my demand, and how do I time that if I have a product that isn't selling like this? And because the market's small, no product is selling like this. They're selling, even at a fast scale, they're selling in tens of units a week, or that's a high scale product for a lot of manufacturing companies in this space. And then there's an order minimum, because you have to order a certain amount for it to be economical for your manufacturer, so you try to time that and make sure you don't over order. And basically where it ends up being is you basically need to be almost out of stock before you can even start placing a new order, and that's if there's no supply chain issues, which happen even outside of COVID. But considering all of that, what ends up happening is once your order's ready to come, if you're lucky enough that it can come over by air, you're looking at potentially 2 weeks for delivery. And then if you're looking by sea, you're potentially anywhere from 45 to 90 days. And that's if you're doing smaller parts. And if you're talking like larger parts where you need multiple containers, I imagine most large exhaust manufacturing companies are doing like 10 plus containers at a time. They're probably waiting upwards of 90 days without a single slowdown, getting through customs okay, from the day they order, or from the day their order is ready to ship to shipment. So from when they order, they're probably looking at anywhere between 120 to 150 days if they're going by sea, depending on what they're doing. That's specifically for using sheet metal, but it's in that vein. So you have small companies, trying to deal with that long lead time on their products and balancing staying profitable so they can eat and pay their employees and do all that stuff. It's not an easy thing, and what it ends up being is lots of time out of stock and back ordered. So it's a deep problem, like you guys can tell, and of course, there are other factors, but those are the two main leading factors. And I think the cumulative understanding is it's a very small market, and I understand it's hard to understand at this small market, but it's a small market. The margins are not great. Car parts do not have the same margins, especially because when you consider how critical you as a consumer or anyone is of their car part, if there's a problem, if there's a blemish, typically it's the replacement of the whole part or a refund, which means with larger and more expensive goods, that means huge losses on your operation sides, and you can see where it's going. So that's why we don't see massive companies that are taking over like Amazon in the car space. That's why we see diversification, and unfortunately that's why we see long periods of times where parts just aren't in stock anymore. Now, COVID has holistically made this whole thing worse, because you combine all of that with people having less money, manufacturers having to support their employees and their infrastructure and doing historically less business. And with all that combined with the supply chain issues that are happening at manufacturing, all of a sudden you have extremely long wait times. You have extremely hard to manage coordination and orders with respect to your manufacturers. And you have a very unpredictable consumer market, because people were out of work. People still are struggling. People aren't spending as much money on their cars as they used to. Society's become more frugal, and not all together, but especially when you consider cars. So that decision making that manufacturers are already engaging with of how much do we reorder, how often do we do it, comes with the unpredictable market. And like the title of this video, we come down to why are parts never in stock? and that's exactly why. Thanks for watching, guys.